I wasn't always a man who had it all. In fact, my childhood felt like an endless series of obstacles stacked against me. My parents worked relentlessly, just barely managing to keep the electricity on and food on the table. From an early age, I understood the weight of hard work and sacrifice. I can still recall the nights when all we had to eat was rice and beans, yet my parents made sure we sat together at the table, acting as though it was a grand feast. They instilled in me the belief that love, not material wealth, is what truly builds a family. Those lessons shaped the man I would become. By the time I turned 18, my father's health had begun to decline, forcing me to step up and support my family. I found work at a local repair shop, putting in long hours while my friends left for college. It wasn't glamorous, but I found a certain satisfaction in fixing things, restoring broken machines, and giving them new life. Before long, I became one of the most trusted mechanics in our small town. Still, despite my growing success, a part of me yearned for something more, a family of my own, one I could pour my love and devotion into. That longing changed the moment I met Sophie. She was unlike anyone I'd ever known, kind, intelligent, and breathtakingly beautiful. Her smile could brighten even the darkest days, and her laughter had a way of dissolving stress like it was never there. We fell in love quickly, and before I knew it, we were walking down the aisle, pledging to stand by each other for the rest of our lives. I believed I had found the perfect partner, someone to share my dreams, my struggles, and my victories. Together, we built a life I was proud of, a home filled with laughter, 2 incredible sons, and a future that seemed as radiant as the sun. I dedicated myself to being the best husband and father I could be, never questioning the sacrifices because I believed in what we had. But as life often proves, even the strongest foundations can crack when the smallest flaws go unnoticed. Tiny, seemingly insignificant details can unravel even the grandest plans. Consider the Challenger disaster of 1986, where a single faulty O-ring led to catastrophe. Or a blood clot, no larger than a grain of sand, that can block an artery and end a life. Even a simple icy patch on the road can send a car spinning into tragedy. Life is filled with these fragile moments, overlooked factors with the power to bring everything crashing down. And when I look back, I can't help but see the parallel in my own life. Marriage, by any definition, is a monumental commitment. For me, it meant everything. Sophie and I had been together for over 8 years, raising our 2 sons, Ethan and Liam. Ethan carried my name, and Liam was named after my father. We had a comfortable home, perfect for a growing family. Though I never earned a college degree, I built a stable career as a mechanic, one that provided us with security and happiness. The long hours never bothered me because I was working for something I believed in. My marriage was the cornerstone of my life, the responsibility I cherished most. Yet, in the end, it wasn't some dramatic betrayal or massive failure that unraveled it all. It was something small. For me, it was a tiny blood vessel, positioned just a little too close to another. Over time, it swelled and eventually made contact, triggering a migraine that would change everything. That day, the pain came on suddenly, sharp and relentless. The usual symptoms followed: blinding sensitivity to light, an unbearable assault of sounds, and the sickening wave of nausea from even the faintest smells. I recognized it immediately. The problem? I didn't have my Imitrex inhaler with me. Without it, there was no quick relief, no easy way to stop the agony. The pills I had were slow to work and far less effective. The pain became unbearable, forcing me to stop working. I stumbled into my boss's office, barely able to explain what was happening. Concerned, he immediately called his secretary, Emma. "Get him home now," he ordered. "Don't let him drive. Go quickly." Emma and my boss helped me outside, where she propped me up against a wall before rushing to get her car. With my hands pressed against my temples and my eyes squeezed shut against the harsh daylight, I waited, trying to will the pain away. Once in the car, I slumped back, shutting everything out. The migraine only worsened. Light stabbed at my eyes, sounds pulsed like a hammer against my skull, and every breath carried scents that turned my stomach. Thankfully, Emma knew where I lived, so I didn't have to give her directions. The drive felt endless, but eventually, we arrived. She helped me inside and guided me to the kitchen, where I managed to direct her to the refrigerator. She retrieved my inhaler and placed it in my hand, steadying it as I inhaled the medication. Within moments, I felt it begin to work. The pain didn't vanish instantly, but the edge dulled enough for me to function again. I asked Emma to help me to the living room, where I collapsed onto the couch. She closed the blinds, turned off the lights, and waited until I assured her the worst had passed. Only then did she leave, and I made sure to thank her before she walked out the door. Silence wrapped around me, and exhaustion quickly pulled me into sleep. When I woke, voices drifted through the room. It was dark now, and for a moment, I struggled to place where I was. The migraine had faded, leaving behind only a dull weakness. Sitting up slowly, I listened and immediately recognized the voices. It was Sophie and our neighbor Olivia. They must not have realized I was home. The lights were still off, and maybe Sophie assumed I had come in late and gone straight to bed. Then again, my car wasn't in the driveway. She likely had no idea I was even there. I thought about surprising them, sneaking in quietly with a grin, maybe cracking a joke to catch them off guard. I even stood up, ready to tiptoe toward the door, but then I heard their conversation and froze. "Come on, Sophie," Olivia urged eagerly. "Tell me, how was it? Was it as good as before? Spill the details." Sophie chuckled softly, a sound that used to warm me but now felt like ice. "It was incredible," she said, her voice dreamy. "Honestly, it felt like I was in heaven. Even better than before, mind-blowing. The best sex I've ever had." Olivia gasped. "Better than with Ethan? Better than your husband?" Sophie didn't miss a beat. "Hell yes. I love Ethan, but he's never made me feel like that. Never. And of course, I'd never let him do the things I do with Noah. He'd think I was some kind of tramp." Olivia gave an awkward laugh. "So, does Noah think you're a tramp?" Sophie smirked. "Of course, but I'm his tramp, and I like it. God, I can't wait for next time." Olivia's tone grew serious. "Aren't you scared Ethan will find out? What would he do? You're risking everything." Sophie shrugged. "Ethan will never find out. And even if he did, so what? He wouldn't do anything. He's too nice. He'd forgive me because he wouldn't risk losing the kids. I'd take them in a heartbeat with the right lawyer, and he knows it." Olivia hesitated, her concern finally showing. "That doesn't sound like you, Sophie. You say you love Ethan, but how can you talk about him like this? I think you're making a huge mistake." Sophie's voice softened, but there was no regret, just certainty. "I do love Ethan. I really do. But I don't want to end things with Noah either. I need both, the love from Ethan and the passion from Noah. I'm not giving it up." That was enough. The migraine? Gone. But it was replaced by something worse, a crushing pain in my chest. My stomach twisted, my breath caught, and a ringing filled my ears. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I gripped the doorframe to steady myself, waiting for the dizziness to pass. But even then, I didn't say anything. Not yet. When my body calmed, the emptiness gave way to something hotter, anger. A searing, blinding rage that surged through me. I stood tall, drew a shaky breath, and stepped into the kitchen. Silence hit instantly. Olivia saw me first. Her eyes widened, her face pale. She slapped a hand over her mouth like she could shove the words back in. "Oh my God," she whispered. Sophie turned. Her face morphed from satisfaction to shock, shock to fear, and then anger. She shoved her chair back, standing like she was ready for a fight. "How much did you hear?" she snapped. "Why were you hiding there, spying on me?" I didn't answer. I just stared at her, the woman I'd loved for 8 years. My eyes flicked to Olivia, who couldn't handle the tension. I should go," Olivia stammered, getting up quickly. "Jack and I will keep the boys if you don't come get them. I'll call you later." She rushed out, leaving me alone with Sophie, the woman who had just burned our life to the ground. I turned back to her, my mind racing with memories, birthdays, anniversaries, lazy Sundays with the boys. Moments I thought were real. Now they felt distant, like echoes from someone else's life. "Where are the boys?" I asked, my voice cold. "Were you thinking about them while you were busy with your fun? Or were you too caught up in the thrill to care?" her face twisted with anger. There with Grace. Olivia and I went shopping, and Jack was watching them. I wasn't with anyone else, just Olivia, she added smugly. Then her confidence faltered. What are you even doing home? Where's your car? Why were you sitting in the dark? Were you spying on me? I came home early with a migraine, I replied flatly. Henry had Emma drive me because I couldn't handle the light. I took my Imitrex and fell asleep. I've been here ever since. A wave of nausea hit me. Your voices woke me up, I added. And what I heard made me sick. I didn't wait for her response. I stumbled to the bathroom, collapsed to my knees, and gripped the toilet. My body convulsed, but nothing came up. Just dry heaves, like my soul was trying to purge the betrayal. Eventually, the nausea faded, leaving me hollow. I sat there on the cold tile floor, my cheek pressed against the porcelain, trying to catch my breath. When I felt steady enough, I got up and went back to the kitchen. Sophie was still there, staring out the window, her face unreadable. I'm going to pick up the boys, I said coldly. I'll put them to bed tonight. I didn't wait for her to reply. I just walked out. The Reeds lived next door, our closest friends. Funny how that title felt like a cruel joke now. As I climbed their steps, I wondered, how much did Jack know? Should I ask? Would it even matter? I knocked twice and stepped inside. Olivia sat at the kitchen table, her coffee cup trembling slightly in her hands. Jack was beside her, his face tight with concern. One look told me she'd already told him. His expression was full of pity. Hers? Pure fear. I'm here to pick up the boys, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Are they ready? I didn't wait for an answer. I walked past Jack, heading toward the living room where I knew my sons were, innocent, laughing, oblivious to the storm that was tearing their family apart. And as I crossed that threshold, I wondered if I'd ever feel whole again. Sure enough, the boys were sitting on the floor, working on a puzzle while Grace watched over them. She greeted me with a bright smile. Hi, Mr. Walker. Are you here for the boys? I nodded. I'll grab their jackets, she said, disappearing into the next room. As I watched my sons focused on fitting colorful pieces together, a deep sadness settled over me. These small, beautiful moments, ordinary scenes of family life, were the real casualties of betrayal. The everyday joys that should have been untouched by adult mistakes now carried invisible scars. This was one of those moments. Thanks, Grace. I'll be in the kitchen when they're ready, I said quietly and made my way back. Jack and Olivia were still at the kitchen table. I looked at Olivia first, then at Jack. My voice came out sharper than I intended. Did you know? Did you both know she was cheating on me? Jack, how did it feel sitting across from me, laughing, sharing drinks, knowing this? Did it give you some twisted satisfaction? The words were harsh, but I needed answers. Jack's face darkened. He shot a glare at Olivia before turning to me. I didn't know anything, man. I swear. If I had, I would have told you right away. I can't believe she knew and didn't tell me. His jaw clenched. That's low. Damn low. You don't deserve this. I won't apologize for her, but I'm here if you need me. His words felt genuine. The anger in his eyes wasn't for me. It was for Olivia, and I believed him. If Jack had known, he would have told me. This betrayal had been Olivia and Sophie's secret. I turned to Olivia. Thank you, Olivia. Thanks for letting me be the fool, the neighborhood joke. Did it feel good, knowing what you knew? Hearing her brag about it like it was something to be proud of? I hope it was worth it. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Grace return with the boys. I forced a smile as they bounded in, each holding a cookie. But Grace's tense expression told me she'd overheard more than I wanted. I prayed she hadn't caught the worst of it, though her face said otherwise. I silently promised this would be the last time Olivia was near my kids. I didn't know how yet, but I'd make it happen. Once home, the boys ran upstairs to change for dinner. I moved through the quiet kitchen and into the living room, where Sophie sat alone. The room was dim, lit only by fading daylight through the curtains. She was hunched on the couch, her face pale, eyes red and glossy from tears. The anger and defiance from earlier were gone, replaced by something softer, fear, maybe even regret. But it was too late for that. Her tears didn't stir sympathy. They filled me with disgust. Where was this regret when it mattered? Now, it felt performative, like a script she thought might fix things. This wasn't sorrow. It was manipulation. I broke the silence with an icy question. Who is he? What does he have that I don't? She stared at me, silent. I turned to leave, but her voice stopped me. Who he is doesn't matter, she whispered. This isn't about you. Ethan, I'm so sorry you found out this way. I never wanted to hurt you. I never meant for you to know. Her words hit like another slap. Not sorry for what she'd done, just sorry I found out. No apology for her choices, no accountability. Just regret that the lie was over. I sank into the chair she'd bought me for our 5th anniversary. It used to be my favorite, but now it felt cold, just another object in the room. Let me explain, she pleaded. This doesn't have to be the end. We can move forward, just like before. We can make it work if you just try to understand. You will do this. Her tone shifted from pleading to insisting, the same stubborn edge she used when she wanted her way. I looked at her, my voice calm but firm. Can you tell me it's over? Can you promise you'll never see him again? Silence. I gripped the arms of the chair, my knuckles white with strain. The tension burned through me, but I stayed in control. Sophie just stared, her eyes wide, tears falling, but no words came. That silence was my answer. She wasn't going to stop. Her conversation with Olivia replayed in my mind. I want both. She wanted me and him, and she expected me to accept it. I stood up. I guess that's your answer, I said quietly. I'll put the boys to bed after dinner. Then we'll talk about what happens next. Tomorrow, I'll start moving my things out. I'll stay with my brother for a while. I walked into the kitchen, the place people drift to when life falls apart. Funny how that works. Like the hum of the fridge can somehow hold you together. Sophie busied herself with dinner, avoiding my eyes. I took the boys to the playroom, letting their laughter wash over me. For an hour, I was just dad, building towers, playing games, listening to their wild stories. Their innocence was a brief escape from the wreckage. Eventually, Sophie called us to the table. The boys raced ahead, giggling, while I reminded them to wash their hands. Their carefree energy was beautiful and heartbreaking, a stark contrast to the weight pressing on my chest. Dinner was lively for them, their chatter filling the room. Sophie and I sat in silence, the space between us heavier than words. Afterward, she cleaned the kitchen while I took the boys upstairs to get ready for bed. We read a couple of stories, laughed a little, and finally, they settled in. I stood in the doorway, watching them pull their blankets up to their chins, small faces peaceful in sleep. My eyes stung, my throat tight. I knew this chapter was ending. There was no going back. Downstairs, I sank into the armchair, feeling everything slip away. I had loved Sophie with everything I had, but her words echoed. He never made me feel this way. I'm his strumpet. Those words carved out any space where forgiveness might have lived. I couldn't unhear them. I couldn't unknow them. And with that, the life I thought I had was gone. Sophie entered the room and sat down, her posture tense but controlled. We need to talk, she said, her voice measured, almost rehearsed. I know you're upset, but you have to understand. What I have with Noah is just sex, just excitement. It's nothing compared to what I feel for you. I love you, not him. He's just a distraction. It'll pass. But right now, I can't stop seeing him. This doesn't have to change anything between us. We can go back to how we were if you just let this happen. Her words spilled out quickly, like she was racing to say them before I could respond. But they felt hollow, empty echoes of what love should sound like. You can't stop seeing him, I repeated, my voice low. And you expect me to allow it? Are you insane, or just delusional? Either way, this ends now. She looked at me, frustration flaring in her eyes. You're not understanding. There isn't us, Ethan. There's a future. It's you and me. This is just temporary. You can't throw everything away over this. No, you don't understand, I replied sharply. There is no us. There's you, and there's him. That's all. This is over. Finished. There's nothing to negotiate. After 8 years of marriage, you should know me well enough to understand that I'll never agree to this. Her voice softened, shifting from defiance to pleading. But Ethan, I love you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I don't love Noah. Please, for the sake of our marriage, for our family, just give me this time. I stared at her, my heart feeling like it was splitting apart. Take all the time you want, I said coldly. Tomorrow, I'll contact a lawyer. We'll split everything fairly. I won't try to hurt you the way you've hurt me. I just want this to end. Exhaustion washed over me. I wanted nothing more than to lie down and forget, even just for a moment. The ache in my chest was worse than any migraine I'd ever had, and I longed for relief. But her next words stunned me. Then damn you, she spat, her voice sharp as a blade. No divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way. I'll take everything, your house, your money, and your boys. I'll make sure you barely see them. If you try to take this from me, it'll cost you everything. And I'll still have Noah. You can't stop me. Her words hit like a slap, and suddenly everything became clear. This marriage had ended long before tonight. This wasn't the heat of the moment. It was calculated. She had planned for this, ready for the day I'd find out. Rather than stop, she prepared to destroy me. There was no love left, only greed and cruelty. A desire to control, to humiliate me. The realization crushed any lingering hope I had for us. This wasn't the woman I loved. Maybe she never was. I glared at her, my anger rising with every breath. Whatever smugness she'd felt melted away as she saw the change in my expression. Her confidence faltered, replaced by fear. My voice cut through the tense silence. Here's what you need to understand, Sophie. When you corner a rat, it fights back. It'll go to the bitter end when it has no way out. You should have thought about that before pushing me this far. But now you've done it, and you'll pay for it. Please, Ethan, she pleaded, her tone desperate now. I don't want this, but I don't have a choice. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to keep you from leaving us. You won't leave. I know you. You love me and the boys too much to walk away. You'll stay. I know you will. I stared at her, the last threads of my patience unraveling. Goodbye, Sophie. Tell the boys I'll see them when I can. I'll grab a few things now and come back later for the rest when we can agree on a time. I headed upstairs, packing quickly. Just the essentials, some bathroom items, a few pairs of socks, underwear, and jeans. 8 years of marriage reduced to a small bag. What remained were just bitter memories. But I still had my 2 boys, and they were all I cared about now. When I came back downstairs, Sophie was sitting by the kitchen door, clearly ready to try again. Ethan, please don't do this. I'm begging you. You don't have to leave. Just tell me you'll end it with him, I replied. Tell me you'll never see him again. We can have a chance. Just tell me. She hesitated, then whispered, I can't. I just can't. I pushed past her, feeling the rage boiling inside, the urge to lash out physically, but I stayed in control. I'll come by in the evenings after work to see the boys, so they don't notice anything right away. With that, I opened the door and walked out. The door slammed shut behind me. I threw my bag into the back seat of my truck, climbed in, and drove away without looking back. On the road, I called my brother, Logan. He lived about 10 miles away, alone since his wife had left him for his best friend 2 years ago. Logan had long stopped caring about her. They were still technically married, but he never pursued a divorce. Instead, he drowned his sorrows in booze. Not out of control, just perpetually buzzed, enough to numb the memories. Logan picked up after a couple of rings. Come over, he said simply. When I arrived, I found the spare key under the flower pot on the porch and let myself in. Logan's house was immaculate, as always. For all his flaws, he was compulsively neat. Seeing everything in its place felt oddly comforting, a sharp contrast to the wreckage of my own life. I found some beer in the fridge, made myself comfortable, and tried to relax. By the time Logan came home, I was already halfway drunk. We went out to get more, drinking deep into the night. I gave him the simplest version of the truth. Sophie and I fought. I needed a place to stay. Logan didn't press for details. He just sat with me, nursing his beer, keeping me from drinking too much. You're my brother, he said quietly. I'll always be here for you. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and an even heavier heart. The hangover was my own fault, but no amount of alcohol could drown the pain. I dragged myself to the bathroom, letting cold water from the shower wash away the remnants of the night before. There was no point in staying drunk. It wouldn't fix anything. On the counter, I found a note from Logan. Gone to work. Check in with you later. Not surprising. It was Saturday, and we both worked for the same company, maintaining heavy construction equipment for contractors across the state. The job was demanding, but the pay was solid, enough to support my family. Or so I thought. As I sat in Logan's quiet house, the silence gnawed at me. I realized how much I'd sacrificed to provide for my family. The big house Sophie loved so much had been my pride, a symbol of security and stability for us. But now, it looked different in my mind. To me, it had been a home. To her, it was leverage, a weapon she could use in a divorce to secure the money I worked so hard to earn, all while she indulged in her affair. I thought about that house, the one she adored, the money I'd broken my back to bring in. To me, it was about honoring my family. To her, it was just a tool, a place to parade around in new lingerie bought for another man. The realization made me sick. Everything I'd built had become just another piece in her betrayal. I cranked the water up, letting the noise drown out my thoughts, even though I was running late. I needed to get out, get to work. A place where I could think clearly, make plans, and process everything I couldn't handle now. Sophie had already thought this through. Her words from the night before made that clear. She'd anticipated my shock, my inability to think straight. She'd strategized her moves, building a divorce plan designed to strip me of everything. Our house, our kids, my peace of mind. She was counting on me to fall apart, framing me as the villain if I didn't agree to her terms. It wasn't just betrayal. It was calculated manipulation. I dressed quickly and grabbed a box of large trash bags. Knowing she'd be out that morning, taking the boys to her mother's, I drove to the house and went inside. It felt hollow, like the walls themselves knew what had happened. I went to the bedroom and emptied my closet, stuffing clothes into the bags. Bathroom items went into a smaller bag. I carried everything to my truck, tossing the bags into the back seat. But I wasn't ready to leave, not yet. I went back inside, standing in what used to be our bedroom. It didn't feel like mine anymore. I sat down on the floor, staring at the empty space where my things used to be. That's when it hit me, all of it. The weight of 8 years, the love I thought was real, the life I believed we'd built together. I let the grief take over, crying for the life I'd lost. Not for Sophie, but for the illusion I'd believed in. At work, I buried myself in tasks, channeling everything into repairs. I didn't stop, not for lunch, not for breaks. I was grateful for the distraction, losing myself in engines, fuel injectors, timing chains, and broken drivetrains. The harder the job, the better. It kept the pain at bay. 10 hours passed before Logan tapped me on the shoulder, snapping me out of the trance. Hey man, take a break. Seriously, you're making the rest of us look lazy, he said with a half smile, though his eyes were filled with concern. I looked up, exhausted. Sorry, little brother. Just trying to bury myself in work. Trying to forget. Didn't mean to overdo it. Logan studied me for a second, then gently grabbed my elbow, leading me to the break room. We'd always been close, especially after losing our parents in a car accident 10 years ago. He'd been my best man at my wedding, the godfather to my boys. He knew when something was wrong. I slumped into a chair while he handed me a steaming cup of coffee. It tasted bland, but the warmth grounded me. Okay, he said, sitting across from me. Talk. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. Start from the beginning. I didn't hold back. For 10 minutes straight, I spilled everything. The shame, the humiliation, the rage. I told him about Sophie's threats to take everything, her smug confidence that I wouldn't fight back, and how she crafted this situation so that I'd either accept her affair or lose everything I loved. She wanted me to surrender, to normalize her betrayal as just part of our marriage. I described the look on her face when she talked to Olivia about her lover, the twisted satisfaction in her voice as she detailed how amazing it was. I told him about her threats to use the house, the kids, and every bit of leverage she had to destroy me if I didn't comply. Her disdain, her arrogance. It was seared into my memory. She made it clear that her affair wasn't a mistake. It was a choice she wasn't willing to undo. Noah was more important to her than anything we'd built. Logan listened in silence, his expression darkening with every word. By the time I finished, I felt empty, drained, and somehow even angrier. Logan was stunned. He'd always thought of Sophie as a good woman, a caring mother. I'd never hinted at trouble in our marriage because, honestly, I hadn't seen it coming. We were solid, or so I thought. But now he saw the truth etched into my face, in the rawness of my words. "You didn't deserve this," Logan finally said, his jaw tight. "You gave her everything." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat, and she spit on it. Logan leaned back, shaking his head. "She's not gonna win, Ethan. I don't care what she's planned. We'll figure it out. You've got me. You're not doing this alone." Those words hit differently. Not just comfort, but a promise. Logan wasn't the kind of guy to say things he didn't mean. He'd been through his own heartbreak, left standing in the wreckage of someone else's betrayal. He knew this pain. We sat there for a while, saying nothing. Just two brothers, trying to piece together the wreckage of one more broken marriage. Eventually, he clapped me on the shoulder. "Come on, let's finish the day. You'll feel better." He was right. Work didn't fix anything, but it helped. It was something I could control when everything else felt like it was slipping away. When the day finally ended, I was exhausted, not just physically, but down to my core. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but one thing was clear. Sophie's chapter in my life was closing, and I was the one turning the page. Logan's shock morphed into seething anger. His fists clenched, jaw tightening as he watched me. His brother, his closest friend, reduced to something fragile and broken. "Ethan, listen," he said, his voice low but filled with an intensity one hadn't heard before. "You're not just going to take this, are you? You've got to do something. Let me and the guys help. You don't deserve this." His concern was real, heavy in the air between us. I felt it, but it didn't change the hollow ache inside me. I looked up at him, hopeless. "What can I do, Logan? If I divorce her, she'll take everything. Child support, the house, the car. You know I'd never take anything away from my boys. She's using them against me, and she knows it. She knows I won't hurt them. And now some guy who thinks it's fine to sleep with another man's wife will end up taking my place. I'm stuck." Logan's face darkened, his voice a low growl. "To hell with both of them. I loved Sophie like a sister, but she made her choice, and now she's got to live with it. We're going after them both. First, we figure out who this guy is. That's the easy part. Let me make some calls, and then we'll talk." I shrugged, skeptical. "Fine, but I don't see how it helps. She won't tell me anything about him." Logan smirked, a sharp edge to his grin. "Doesn't matter. We'll find him, and he'll wish we hadn't. You know there's no getting Sophie back, right? After this, there's no respect left. If you stay, she'll never respect you again. She's someone else's toy now." His words stung, sharp, brutal, but honest. For a moment, I was taken aback. Then, a faint smile crept across my face, bitter and hollow. "You're right. She's not my wife anymore. Last night, I learned how fast love can turn into hate. And today, my hate for her is stronger than the love I once had. She turned it into something ugly, something that's going to haunt her." We talked more, our words filling the empty spaces left by my crumbling marriage. When work ended, no overtime for once, we headed to a nearby bar. This wasn't a night for drinking. It was for planning. Logan made a few calls while the rest of us talked. I was surprised by the support from my friends. They didn't need the details. They just wanted to know how they could help. Together, we came up with a plan. At 7 p.m., I pulled into the driveway. Funny, I used to call this my home. Now it was just a building, hollow and cold. I went straight to the kitchen, shrugged off my jacket, and moved into the living room. There she was, Sophie, sitting comfortably, watching Ethan and Liam play a video game. The scene etched itself into my mind, not because it was special, but because it was the last time I'd see her as anything other than a stranger. She glanced at me, a faint smile tugging at her lips. But now, I understood it for what it was, contempt. She didn't love me. She pitied me. She thought she'd won. My gaze turned cold, and when she saw it, her smile faltered. She looked away. Back in the kitchen, I grabbed some leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes from the fridge. I wasn't hungry, but eating felt like something to do, something normal. I'd planned to talk to the boys before bed, but Logan convinced me to hold off. That conversation would come soon enough, and it would mark the first step in a battle I knew I couldn't win. But I'd go down swinging. I sat at the table, eating slowly. The food tasted like ash in my mouth, but I forced it down, needing the strength. Halfway through, Sophie walked in and sat across from me. "Have you calmed down after last night?" she asked, her tone condescending. "Can we talk like civilized adults now?" I looked at her, incredulous. Civilized adults? Like a cheating wife and her humiliated husband? But I didn't say it. I just stared. "So, you're just going to sit there and sulk?" she pressed, clearly irritated. "I expected more from you, Ethan. We need to think about the kids now. You need to remember your role as their father." My fork paused midair. I stared at her, my voice calm, even. Am I their father? That's something I'm starting to question. Maybe I should get some tests done. Her face darkened with fury. She opened her mouth to lash out, but I cut her off. "Careful, Sophie. The kids might hear you if you start shouting. Remember them? The same kids you accused me of forgetting last night? Now it's your turn to think about them. Think about what you've done to their world. You didn't just cheat. You destroyed our family." Her expression twisted with anger, but she lowered her voice to a hiss. "You didn't take anything I said last night seriously. I thought you'd get over it and return to your normal life. Nothing has to change here at home. I still love you. You're still my husband. That hasn't changed. Neither you nor the kids will lose anything familiar." She leaned in, her voice dripping with manipulation. "I keep everything discreet. I only see him when the kids are at school, when you're at work. You have nothing to lose, Ethan. I'm always here for you." I didn't reply. I kept eating, slow and methodical, my face blank, my eyes empty. The silence said everything. As I looked at her, I felt nothing. No love, no hate, just emptiness that seemed to rattle her more than anger ever could. For the first time, I saw it, a flicker of fear. "What are you going to do?" she asked, her voice quieter now, tinged with uncertainty. "Are you going to make this harder than it has to be? I hoped you loved me enough to let me have this. He doesn't take anything from you. I'll always be here for you. Why can't you understand?" She was growing emotional, but I just kept chewing, letting her words hang in the air unanswered. Finally, I swallowed and spoke. "We can talk about this later. I won't have this conversation while the kids are awake. I listened to you last night. I didn't like it, but I listened." I stood up, taking my plate to the sink. I didn't look back. Her words meant nothing now. Sophie seemed to calm at my words. She even managed a faint smile. "Thank you for this," she said softly. "I think you were right about some things you said, but your words hurt me. I'll take the boys to bed soon, and then we can talk." As she brushed past me, her hand briefly touched my shoulder. I flinched instinctively, pulling away before I could stop myself. She noticed, quickly withdrawing her hand. The disgust I felt at her touch was undeniable, a visceral reaction to everything she'd done. I spent some time with the boys, trying to act normal, though I knew everything was about to change. I'd accepted that Sophie's choices had destroyed what we had. Part of me wondered if I should just play along, pretend, accept her terms, and wait until this phase ended. After all, she claimed she still loved me, still wanted to stay married. But deep down, I knew I couldn't do it. Not now. Not ever. It was after 9 p.m. when Sophie returned. She sighed, dropping into a chair with forced casualness. "The boys are asleep," she said, smiling faintly. "They're getting so big now, almost too old to be tucked in. They say good night, but I know they turn the lights back on to read. They're good boys." I nodded, my heart heavy. They are good kids. It's a shame they'll have to go through this. I just don't know how to shield them from the pain. Her smile faltered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "What do you mean?" "Nothing has to change, Ethan. Just let me have this, and we can go back to being the family we were. Be patient." It'll end soon. You won't lose anything. I love you, and I want to stay your wife. This is just something I need to do. That's all. I stared at her. The woman I'd loved for 8 years, the mother of my children. We'd built a life together, one I thought was unbreakable. But now, everything was different, and she couldn't seem to understand why. I wasn't planning to get into this tonight, I said quietly, but I need to be clear. I listened to you last night. You said you love me, that you want to stay married, that this other man doesn't take anything from me. You won't tell me who he is because, as you said, it's none of my business. Then you made it clear what would happen if I filed for divorce. You threatened to take everything, including the boys. You were very clear about what you'd do. Sophie's face darkened, her smile gone. She didn't like hearing her own words reflected back at her. Maybe they sounded different coming from me. Ugly, raw, undeniable. You don't see this the way I do, she snapped, her tone defensive. I told you this has nothing to do with our marriage. Why can't you believe me when I say I still love you and want us to stay together? What I heard last night wasn't love, I replied, my voice firm. It was contempt. Contempt for me, for our marriage, for everything I've done for this family. When I got angry, you responded with threats. Threats you clearly thought through long before you ever spoke to me. You humiliated me, belittled me, and then accused me of misunderstanding you. You knew exactly how I'd react, and you already had all your answers ready. Why do you think that is? My anger crept into my voice, eroding the calm I'd been clinging to. Sophie's defiance only fueled the fire. And here's what I realized last night. I continued, my tone sharp. You backed me into a corner, thinking I had no way out. But you forgot one thing, Sophie. When you corner a rat, it fights back. Even against a cat, even when it has nothing left to lose. With those words, I stood and walked toward the kitchen. As I reached the door, I stopped and turned back. I'm going to stay somewhere else tonight. Maybe for a while. I'll come home after work so the kids don't notice anything. At least not at first. Her voice trembled, a hint of desperation slipping through. What do you mean, staying somewhere else? Why not stay here? We can't fix this if you leave. Ethan, don't do this. I love you. I don't want to lose you. I don't know what I'll do if you leave. Please, let's work this out. There has to be a way. I met her gaze, my words deliberate and final. I'm sorry, Sophie. The only thing I know for certain is that I don't love you anymore. Your infidelity succeeded. It eliminated all the love I had for you. That's the one thing I'm sure of. I don't know what comes next, but I know there's no going back. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, Ethan, what about your vows? To love and cherish me? Have you forgotten them? I looked at her, my voice steady, unwavering. No, I haven't forgotten, but I also remember your vows. You swore on our wedding day to forsake all others, but you didn't. You promised to love only me, but you gave what was ours to someone else. I cared for you, loved you, kept my vows, and gave you everything I had. But it wasn't enough. You gave away what was mine and destroyed my love for you in the process. So yes, I can walk away. You've shattered everything, and I will leave. I left without another word, driving straight to Logan's house. He welcomed me without hesitation, offering me a place to stay for as long as I needed. I just need time, I told him. Time to finish what I've started. Soon it'll all be over, and I can begin my new life. Over the next few days, I threw myself into work during the day and spent my evenings with the kids. But I avoided speaking to Sophie. She tried to start conversations, but I'd walk away. One evening, she yelled after me, but I grabbed my keys and left without a word. At work, during a break, one of the guys approached Logan. Everything's ready, he said quietly. We'll have the results in a few days. All I had to do now was wait. By the following week, nothing had changed. Each evening, I returned to an increasingly tense Sophie. The kids seemed oblivious, though Liam eventually asked, Are you working more than usual, Dad? When I asked what he meant, he replied, I just don't see you as much in the evenings. I forced a smile, ruffling his hair. I've been busy, buddy, but I promise, we'll spend time together this weekend. I said it like a promise to him, but in reality, it was a promise to myself. Soon, this chapter would close. and I'd be free. Liam seemed satisfied with my promise, and the moment passed like nothing was wrong. But everything was wrong. Sophie kept asking questions, trying to pierce the walls I'd built around myself, but I ignored her. As soon as she tucked the kids into bed, I left the house. By the time she came back downstairs, I was gone. At the end of the week, Logan met me in the break room, sliding a plain manila folder across the table. I gave him a questioning look, but he just nodded toward it. Inside were 2 pages, both bearing the same name. Noah Harrison? So that was him. A junior attorney at Lincoln, Rice & Holmes. 24 years old, almost a decade younger than me. Single. Divorced 2 years ago. Lived in a downtown condo. Sophie had been to his place twice that week, staying over an hour each time. Now I had a name, an address, a face to go with the betrayal. But what I didn't understand was why. What did Sophie see in him that she no longer saw in me? What did he have that was worth throwing away our marriage? Those questions used to haunt me, but not anymore. This wasn't my problem now, not after everything she'd done. Maybe it would have been if she'd come to me earlier, admitted her mistakes, tried to fix what was broken. But instead, she presented her affair like it was something I had to accept, like I was the problem. Now, all that mattered was my next move. I looked at Logan, silently asking for guidance. Somehow, he'd become the steady one, holding me together while my life unraveled. I was lucky to have him, and friends who had my back. Everything's in motion, Logan said quietly. The first step is tonight. I'll call you when it's ready. Keep your phone close. Once I call, you can let her know and end this mess. Fine, I replied, though the knowledge brought no relief. This wasn't how I wanted things to go. But Sophie and her lover had cornered me, and this was the only way I knew to fight back. I wasn't a lawyer or some rich guy with resources to craft an elaborate plan. I was a mechanic, a man who worked with his hands and provided for his family through honest labor. I'd loved Sophie with everything I had, but it wasn't enough for her. Now, all I could do was fight in the way I understood. Soon, she'd understand exactly what that meant. I returned home, sat down for dinner with my family, and pretended everything was normal. Sophie chatted with the kids. I answered when they asked questions, even started a few conversations myself. Inside, I was tense, but I kept my composure. After dinner, I helped the boys with their homework, played video games with them, laughed when they won. I looked like the typical husband and father. Sophie watched from the doorway, arms crossed, leaning casually like nothing was wrong. She seemed more relaxed, convinced that my behavior meant everything was going back to normal. She even smiled, a soft, self-satisfied smile that made my stomach turn. While I was with my sons, Noah Harrison left his office across town, heading to his car. He thought about his last meeting with Sophie 2 days ago, how wild she'd been. She'd even done something new, something she'd never done before. When he asked why, she laughed and said, "My husband found out." Noah had been shocked, but Sophie reassured him. "It's not an issue," she'd said, brushing it off like it was nothing. It struck him as strange, but knowing her husband was aware somehow made it more thrilling. For Noah, it was the best sex yet. So, he didn't question it. As he walked through the alley toward the parking lot, he felt a sudden shove from behind. Before he could react, 2 men grabbed him, dragging him into a shadowy courtyard between buildings. His heart raced as they forced him against a wall. Their faces were hidden behind black ski masks, their strength overwhelming. A third man stepped forward, also masked, wearing gloves. He grabbed Noah's chin, forcing him to look up. "You know a woman named Sophie Walker, hole?" the man growled. Hearing her name sent a chill down Noah's spine. "Oh crap, her husband. I don't know anyone by that name," Noah stammered, shaking with fear. A sharp punch to the ribs cut off his words, knocking the wind out of him. The pain was blinding. "I'll ask you again," the masked man said coldly. "Do you know a woman named Sophie Walker?" Realizing denial wouldn't save him, Noah gasped. Yes, I know her. Please, just let me go." The man leaned in closer, his voice icy. "You will never see or speak to her again. Do you understand me?" "Yes, I understand," Noah choked out, his voice trembling. He prayed it would end there. But it didn't. We don't think someone like you, messing with another man's wife, is very bright, the man whispered. So we're going to make sure you really understand. Noah barely had time to process before the first punch landed. His jaw, his ribs, his stomach. The blows came fast and brutal. He tried to scream, but another hit silenced him. He crumpled to the ground, pain radiating through every inch of his body until he lost consciousness. When he woke, he was slumped against the wall, blood dripping from his face. His body screamed with pain. The masked men were still there. One of them grabbed his face roughly. "Listen carefully," the man said, his voice calm, eerily calm. "You will tell her exactly this. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Walker. It was my mistake, and I regret it. I will never see or speak to you again. I will have no contact with you or your children. I'm sorry I ever met you." Noah nodded weakly, his body too broken to resist. "Say it," the man demanded. Noah's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Walker. It was my mistake. I regret it. I'll never see or speak to you again. I'll have no contact with you or your kids. I'm sorry I ever met you." The masked man gave him one last shove, sending Noah sprawling onto the cold pavement. "Good," the man said. "Now get the hell out of here." Noah didn't need to be told twice. He staggered to his feet, limping away into the night, broken in more ways than one. Back at home, I tucked the boys into bed, kissed them goodnight, and went downstairs. Sophie sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. She glanced up when she saw me, her expression soft, like she thought everything was fine. I didn't say a word. I just waited. My phone buzzed. It was Logan. "It's done." I looked at Sophie, meeting her eyes for the first time that day, and I smiled. "Goodbye. Got it?" Noah nodded weakly, his swollen face barely able to register the fear still etched into his features. They made him repeat the message several times, ensuring every word was burned into his mind. "If you screw this up," the masked leader warned, "you'll pay double." Then they left him, battered, broken, and alone. Hours later, Noah woke up in the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. His injuries weren't life-threatening, but the bruised ribs, fractured jaw, and swelling told a story he'd never forget. Pumped full of painkillers, his body felt numb, though the dull, throbbing ache lingered. He muttered a shaky breath of relief for surviving, but the words he'd been forced to memorize haunted him more than the pain. At home, my phone buzzed just after 8 p.m. I excused myself from the boys, stepping into another room. It was Logan. "It's done," he said quietly. "Lesson 1 complete. He's in the hospital." That was all. No details. None needed. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, feeling a grim, hollow sense of satisfaction. When I returned to the living room, I forced a small smile. Sophie noticed, her eyes softening with relief. She probably thought my mood had improved, that things were getting better. Later that night, after putting the kids to bed, she came downstairs. I was waiting for her, seated at the table. "We need to talk," I said evenly, motioning to the chair across from me. She hesitated, then poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down, her expression hopeful but cautious. "You seem different," she said softly, "more at ease." "I'm so glad. I was terrified I'd lose you, Ethan. That would break my heart. I know you don't believe me, but I love you. I can't lose you over something so trivial compared to what we have." Trivial. That word echoed in my head, rattling like a loose bolt in an engine. I listened in silence, my emotions boiling beneath the surface. Even now, I couldn't deny her beauty. This was the woman I once thought I'd grow old with, but her betrayal had shattered everything we'd built. "It's time to end this," I said, my voice low but firm. "I have something to tell you. Listen carefully." Her hopeful smile faded. "I know your lover's name, Noah Harrison, junior associate at Lincoln, Rice and Holmes, 24 years old. I know where he lives. I know where he works. I know you've seen him twice this week." Her face drained of color, lips parting slightly as if to protest, but I raised a hand to stop her. "That's the problem, Sophie. When I got angry, you didn't apologize. You didn't beg for forgiveness. No, you threatened me. You said you'd take everything. The house, the kids, my life. Your words are burned into my brain. I'll take everything you have. She tried to speak, but the words stuck in her throat. You destroyed our marriage with those words, I continued, my tone sharper now. You left me no choice. You forced me to stand by while you gave yourself to another man like it was nothing. But I told you before, cornered Rats fight back. For the first time, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. She straightened in her chair, her body tense, defenses rising. I know what you told Olivia, that I never made you feel the way he does, that you're his strumpet. I leaned forward slightly, my voice like ice. I'm not sorry that this is ending in a way you won't like. Mr. Harrison has been informed, very clearly, that his time with you is over. He'll never see you again. He'll never speak to you again. Her eyes widened, horror replacing fear. I'm filing for divorce. No alimony. I'll pay child support because my sons deserve everything. But you? You'll work for what you want. The papers are already in motion. You'll be served soon. She shot to her feet, rage overtaking her shock. You're crazy if you think I'll agree to this. I told you I'd take you to the cleaners, and I will, she screamed. I didn't flinch. I simply smiled. A small, cold smile that made her take a step back. Why don't you call Mr. Harrison right now? I said calmly. Let's see what he says. Her face contorted with confusion, then dawning realization. Oh, wait, I added with a shrug. You might have to call the hospital. That call I got earlier? It was about him. He's in the ER at Memorial. Go ahead, use my phone. I have his number. Her expression twisted from fury to horror. What have you done? What did you do to Noah? She gasped, her voice trembling. I leaned back in my chair, unbothered. I've been here all evening. Why do you think I did anything? You made it clear this didn't concern me, remember? My face remained calm, detached, and that terrified her more than if I'd yelled. Sophie had never seen me like this. I'd always been mild-mannered, the nice guy. But now she saw the version of me that no longer cared. She stumbled out of the room, fumbling with her phone. I heard her shaky voice as she made the call. When she returned, her face was pale, streaked with tears. She collapsed into the chair like her body had given up. He's done, she whispered. Noah said he never wants to see me again. He's sending my things back. He said he regrets everything. He doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I calmly set down the newspaper I'd been pretending to read and stood up. Then I guess you have nothing to worry about, I said. My lawyer will handle the rest. This will be over soon. I walked toward the door, then paused. I'll talk to the boys this weekend. I'll explain why we're divorcing. Maybe they're old enough to understand. If not, they'll figure it out when they're older. She sobbed harder, her face buried in her hands. If I remember correctly, I said, my voice low and bitter, you told me this was just a phase. Something that would pass. That we'd go back to normal. Well, Sophie, you're still young, still beautiful. Maybe you'll find someone who's okay with an open marriage. Someone who doesn't mind you having your fun with other men. I let the silence stretch, then added softly, but that's not me. With that, I walked out, leaving her alone in the wreckage of her choices. Children may not understand the complexities of betrayal, but adults live with the consequences of their actions. And those consequences? They're harsh.